So today we're having an expository sermon. So let's read those verses 18 through 25 in Colossians 3. Wives, be subject to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be embittered against them. Children, be obedient to your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing to the Lord. Fathers, do not exasperate your children so that they will not lose heart. Slaves, in all things obey those who are your masters on earth, not with external service, as those who merely please men, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve. For he who does wrong will receive the consequences of the wrong which he has done, and that without partiality. Let's go back to the first, verse 18. Wives, be subject. Now, what I want you to notice is that every one of these contains two parts. Every one of these addresses to the different people contain at least two parts. Now, for convenience sake, and to get through all of this and to keep it into one lesson, I've decided just to concentrate on the first half of the phrase, but introduce you to the second half of the phrase. You can do then your own study. Come out and find out what Jesus is saying to you. I'm going to tell you what he said to me. You can finish it by what he says to you. So, Merriam-Webster defines submit, submission, subjection, as to yield to governance or authority, to subject to a condition, treatment, or operation. Strong's, and is in concordance, says that subject to be put in subjection, and it's from the two Greek words, hupo or hypo tasso, to subordinate, reflexively, to obey. Be under obedience, obedient. Be under subdue unto, subject to unto. Be in subjection to, submit, self unto. It's a voluntary thing. We cannot use this word, we cannot use it to suppress the wife. We can't use it to control the wife. We can't use it to dominate. We can't use it to usurp. That is not what this means. This is not just to the men at all. This has nothing to do with you men. It's the women. Now, we have some examples in the Bible of this submission. Here's what I'm finding interesting about the Bible. On certain subjects, God has a lot to say to women. And on other subjects, he has a lot to say to men. And on some things, he doesn't have much to say to women. And on other things, he doesn't have much to say to men. Now, he didn't talk to men about being under subjection. He didn't talk about that much. The reason being is because we're not to be the ones under subjection. But what he says is, women be subject. So he says, I'm going to give you some examples. And it's interesting because most of the examples we get are negative. Let's look at them. I'll pick three. Two are negative, one's positive, just to kind of balance it. Sarah. Sarah, we're going down to Egypt. We're going to avoid the famine here. We're going to go down there. But you are so beautiful. Gosh, men just drool when they see you, no matter how old you are. And when we get down there, the king's going to want you. And the way the pagan world works is if they want something, they go take it. If somebody else has a possession of it, they get rid of that person. So I don't want to get killed. So you're going to be my sister. We're just brother and sister, traveling along together. We're Captain and Tennille, right? The carpenters, right? We're just traveling along. And he goes, we're not Captain and Tennille, we are the carpenters, right? Because Captain and Tennille were married. So we're the carpenters, Richard and Karen. So we go down there. She is in subjection to her husband. She obeys him. She goes along with him. And we know how that happened, how that ended. Now we come to my favorite female character in the Bible. And if you guys can remember back to last year when we did the women's series, okay, her name's Abigail. She, to me, is the greatest example of being in submission and subjecting herself to a husband. Here was a man who was crude, rude, mean, dirty, nasty, despicable, not a good thing to say about him, but she was his wife. She served her husband. She submitted to his authority. And when he did something really stupid, she fixed it. In subjection to him, but she went and fixed it. So we have a great example. So women, if you're in a relationship with a man who's a jerk, there are ways to handle that and still be a spiritual, scriptural woman. He gives us an example. He gives us another example that I use it as being in subjection, of a woman who is not known for anything good at all. As a matter of fact, I think I have only heard of ever one woman after this woman with that name. Her name is Jezebel. She was married to Ahab. Now Ahab was one of the most meanest, cruelest, sinfulest kings in Israel. I think there was only one or two that was worse than him. And Jezebel was pretty bad. But he wanted a vineyard. He wanted something. And so being the wife who wants to be in subjection, who wants to please her husband, who wants to take care of her husband, wants to make sure that everything's applied, she devises a scheme for him to get his vineyard. Why do we get negative examples from God? And you start look at some of the others. Look at all the other instances. I mean, we didn't start with Eve. We didn't talk about Rachel. We didn't talk about Rebecca. And we didn't talk all these examples. Why do you get all these negative examples? I got a reason. Because you don't need the positive. Because you're made to be in subjection. You're made to voluntarily to give. You're made to be the one who's the support of the marriage, not the outspoken, not the one out front. That's what you're made for. That's how God made us. You know, without the support, a building can't stand. You can't have a roof without walls. That's what the women are. And so he says, I want to warn you ladies, I want to warn you women, you wives, that there going to come time where they're going to be tempted not to be in subjection, not to follow my teachings. So I need to just warn you about those. I don't need to show you how to be a good wife. You know how to be a good wife. I got to warn you not to be a bad one. And so that's a compliment to you, ladies. That's a compliment to women. That he has to spend more time warning us about what not to do than telling us what to do. Because we're going to find something that with the men kind of flips. Next one. Never laugh at your wife's choices. You are one of them. I saw that and I said, we got to have a little pause here. So if all she does is make bad choices, look at where she started. Okay, next. Love your wives. I really wanted to go ahead and do the second part. Do not be embittered against them, but I'm restricting it to loving your wives. Because it's very interesting how God orders things. Women, if you're in subjection to your husband, it makes it easy for him to love you. Husbands, if you love your wife, it's easy for them to be in subjection to you. Isn't it interesting how he did that? He didn't tell women to love their husbands. He didn't tell men to be authoritative or ruler. Because they tie together. And men, you need positive examples. Much more than you need smacks of how not to do it. Because for men, it tends to be natural for us to do the wrong thing. So we need some help. So most of our examples in the Bible of husbands and wives is the husband's loving the wife. Isn't that something? I take this seriously. God had to spend a lot of time, a lot of effort in making sure I knew what I'm supposed to do, because I'm going to screw it up if I don't. And so I said, well, let me choose a few examples. And so, I like to choose ones that we don't necessarily talk about all the time. I try to expose us to other passages. And so the first one I think of is Elkanah and Hannah. Now, how many know who Elkanah and Hannah are? Well, you might remember Hannah. You hardly ever remember Elkanah. That's okay. But we all remember their son, named Samuel. Now, Elkanah loved Hannah. He had a second wife. And it's amazing how nearly every story in the Bible where the man has more than one wife always has problems. Maybe God trying to tell us something, huh? And so there was this enmity. And Hannah was in agony. And it tore Elkanah apart. To have his beautiful bride being rejected by God. But Elkanah showed his love in another way. But in one, he remained faithful to her. He devoted to her. She gets pregnant and has a child. She decides, I'm going to give that child to the Lord. Now, Elkanah could have overruled Hannah. He was the man. Right? He was the head of the house. That was my boy. You're going to take my boy and give him to the high priest? You're going to take my boy away from me? The one we waited and worked and slaved and all this time for and prayed and cried and been tormented, and you're going to take him away from me and give him away? But he loved Hannah. And said, Samuel, you're God's. Could we have done that? Could any of us have done that? I don't think I could have. Another that we are very familiar with is Jacob and Rachel. He worked 14 years for that woman. Indentured servitude. Basically what it amounted to. How many of you worked any time at all for your brides? We may have worked on the lines we were going to use. We may have worked on the timing of popping that question and giving that ring. But we didn't go out and work for her father for 14 years to give her permission to marry her. Another neat love story is Boaz and Ruth. Now, Ruth is coached by Naomi on how to hook the man. Right? So she's trolling, she's fishing. She finds the one big, beautiful fish in that lake that she wants, and Naomi gives her the right bait, throws in the line at the right time, snags her man. But there's a problem. She isn't free to marry him. There's a price that has to come, and he has to be willing to pay it. Not only that, he has to go find the guy that has the rights to marry her. He has to go dig him up, but some distant cousin. But Boaz wants to make sure he does everything right. There's going to be nothing that's going to come between them. And so he goes and he finds this guy, and he goes through all the ritual and all the rites and pays the price to get this woman. And then Abigail's my favorite female character in the Bible. One of my most favorite male is Hosea. Because Hosea, Joseph lived a life that most emulated Jesus. But Hosea's life emulated God's, the Father. Hosea, you know where the red light district is? Yeah. Go. Find a woman that's willing to leave that life and come live with you. That's your wife. Okay. It might be fun for a while. Let's go try it. So he goes and he gets his wife. Her name's Gomer. And for a while, it looks like it's going to work. She gets pregnant. She has a son. But the itch, the yearning, the life that she was taken out of is just too much. She finds other men, and finally she leaves him. But he says in that 3rd chapter that he loved her. Hosea still loved her. And he was willing to pay the price for her. He gathered up his money. He found out where she was. He got what he needed to buy her back. And when he bought her back, he then went through and purified her and cleansed her and made her a bride again. Now that's a love story. I don't think we can match that. When a spouse cheats on one now, it's divorce time. What about Hosea? What about God did that every time we sinned against him? Every time we cheated on him, and he says, get rid of you. Husbands, love your wives. Children, be obedient. We have one here. Now this one sounds easy for most of us. We all know that we have never been really obedient. One of my favorite parables, because these are, I guess is my day of favorites, parables, is this one that Jesus gives. He has 2 sons. Son, I need you to go out and repair the wall in the vineyard, and I need it done today, okay? And the father says, sure, Dad. As the son's leaving, his friends come up and say, hey, let's go over to there, and he goes. Well, but the father doesn't know this is going on. The father comes to the other son and says, son, would you go and help, brother, would you go and repair that wall? He goes, Dad, I've got better things to do than to do your errands. And he goes off. He leaves. Now the first son runs off with his buddies. The second son starts feeling guilty. And he goes and he repairs the wall. Jesus says, now, which son's obedient? The one who says, yeah, Dad, I'll do it, with no intention of doing it. Or the one who changes the heart and does it. He didn't want to do it. It was an imposition. It was putting him out. But he wanted to obey his dad. Eli and Samuel. We hear nothing bad about Samuel as a boy. And he gets confused one night because he keeps hearing this voice and, am I going crazy? Am I hearing things or is it, what's going on? Eli, I keep hearing this voice. Samuel, the next time you hear that voice, just say, Lord, here am I. And then you do whatever that voice tells you to do. Samuel was obedient. How about Noah? He's 500 years old. He decides to have kids. He has 3 of them. Now, let's just suppose that it took maybe 10 years to have the 3 kids, because it takes him a little while. If it took him 500 years to start, probably take him a few to get all of it done. But at that same time that he starts his family, God says, you need to start something else. You need to start building a boat. A boat? And as the one comedian said, he said, Noah, I want you to build a boat. And he goes, right. Right? What's a boat? So there's going to be a flood. Right. What's a flood? For 90 years plus, those 3 sons followed their father's dream. There's no indication whatsoever that they had any question of what their daddy was doing. They were obedient to their dad. They helped him build this folly, this dream. Doesn't that just feel kind of warm inside? That a son loves children of their dad so much they want their dad's dream to be fulfilled instead of maybe their dream? Wouldn't that be great? And then, of course, we have the perfect example. You can't leave Jesus out of the equation, can we? Mary and Jesus, the perfect son with the imperfect parents. And sometimes I feel that way. I used to say about my son, I said there's only one son that's been more perfect than mine. And that was Jesus. There was no terrible twos. There was no, whatever the next phase is, the preschool years, no problems. Started school, no problems. Went and started puberty, no problems. Full-fledged teenager, no problems. Off to college, no problems. This kid never caused any problems. And I know I didn't deserve to have that kind of son. But I was blessed with him. So I want you to take each of your children, parents, because that's the next thing we're going to talk about is fathers exasperating your children, is honor them. Show them your love. Because if you expect them to obey you, you don't want the obedience of fear. You want the obedience of love. And if you exasperate your children, then they're going to lose faith in you. They're going to lose heart. You're not going to be that dad that they want and that they need. So let's look at some examples. I've picked 3 that you may not have picked. Again, I like doing that. How many have heard of Manoah? Well, Manoah was the daddy of Samson. Now, this is an interesting story because the story of Manoah is always taking a back seat. That's Manoah. He's never the driving force. He's never out front. Who did the angel come to see when they were going to prophet, when they were predicting or telling of Samson's birth? The wife. The angel came to, and didn't even tell us the wife's name. God didn't. He went to Manoah's wife and said, you're going to have a son. She tells Manoah, he says, well, get that guy back here and have him come see me. The angel comes back. Didn't go to Manoah. He went to his wife again. She had to go get Manoah so he could meet the angel. Manoah's always in the back seat. They raise a son. He's supposed to be a Nazarite. He's got the vow. He's not supposed to have any alcohol, not even grapes. Okay, nothing from the vine. Never touch a dead, anything dead. All these restrictions that Samson promptly broke all of them. And when he decides to go and get himself a wife, a foreigner, Manoah says, son, all these women here in Israel, you can have your pick. You're so big and strong and handsome and muscular and you got charisma and all this. All these women, you can have any pick you want. Dad, I chose one. She's over here in Philistia. Are you coming or not? I'm a dad. I got to go. I got to go support my son. I don't think he's marrying the right woman, but I've still got to show him that he's my son. And I will go to this foreign land. I will defile myself to honor my son. That's pretty strong. When we think we're supposed to be the drivers, and Manoah is never the driver. We have another dad. His name is Joash. Now he'd be the equivalent to maybe the school janitor. And his son goes out and destroys an altar and an Asherah pole, or this symbol of that people prayed to and worshipped. And the leaders of the city, the mayor, the councilman, the church leader, the worship leader of these idols, come to Joash, who's this little tiny guy in their eyes, right? And goes, who did this? Your son did this. What are you going to do about it? He says, I'm going to support him. He says, he did what you guys should have done. We're supposed to be serving God. And so he tore him down. And I'm supporting him. And because Joash defended and supported his son, Gideon was then enabled to go about and do the miraculous deliverance from the Midianites. So Joash defended his son, supported his son in the face of the mighty, in the face of the powerful, and those who could be intimidating. He did not let himself be intimidated when it came to dealing with his son. Saul and Jonathan. Got to throw in the warning. Your best friend. And everything with this guy. Everything with this girl. You guys just are so in tune with one another that you feel like nothing could separate you. I mean, you just can't imagine having someone so close that just knows your thoughts, knows everything, and you can share anything with them. And the dad says, I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. You cannot, you will not ever have anything to do with David again. And the next time I see him, I'm killing him. Wouldn't you be exasperated if you were a son? Wouldn't you feel that you'd not only lost a friend, because your dad's now physically severed that relationship, but you now have lost a dad? You might obey him, but it won't be because you love him anymore. That's what we do when we exasperate our children. We kill them emotionally. We kill the love that could be between us. In all things, obey. Now, he starts with this one, and this is an interesting passage because of what's going on. You need to know what's going on in contemporary Colossae right now. In Colossae, there's a man named Philemon. He has become a strong Christian, one of the leaders in the Colossae church. Now, Philemon sounds familiar. It's because if you go a few more books into the Bible, you'll find a book called Philemon. There's a man who came to know the Lord. He had become a disciple and follower with Paul. His name was Onesimus. And we're going to talk more about him next week. So when Paul addresses this situation here, we know that there's a specific thing happening. So most likely, when he addressed the issue of wives, there was an issue in the church. When he addressed the issue of husbands, there was an issue in the church. When he addressed the issue of children, there was an issue in the church. And because we know there's a situation going on with slaves, freedmen, and owners. And he says, in all things obey. In the Bible, I found some examples. Abraham and Eliezer. Now, Eliezer probably isn't a very common name. Eliezer was Abraham's valet, his manservant, his caretaker, his right-hand man. He was the guy that was always there. When Abraham needed anything, Eliezer was there. Abraham gets to the point, and so desperate to have children, he says, God, if I die now, Eliezer gets everything, because I don't have any children. But Eliezer, in all things, from what we can see, was faithful and obedient to his master. Now, it had to do with slaves, but Deborah and Barak, to me, is, again, a great story of working together. Barak is the captain, or the commanding general of the group of people, the tribe he was a part of. Deborah was the nation of Israel's judge. She was told, you're going to go conquer this king. And so she says, Barak, he's up in your neck of the woods. Go do it. God's going to bless it. And he said, well, I can't do that because that's your job. Now, that doesn't sound like obedience, right? Could be defiance, but it is obedience because he's reminding Deborah that she has to be the leader. She has to be the one who stands out front. And so sometimes it takes someone telling us that we have to be the ones to step up. There's a job to be done. You've got to do it. You've got to lead it. You've got to direct it. Whether you want to or not, whether you think you're qualified or not, that's not the issue. God said do it. He had put in place a format or way of fighting the enemy. And it was always the judge who led. And they would be breaking precedent if Deborah was not the leader. She would lose face if she wasn't the leader. And Barak subjected himself to that authority. And then another interesting guy that I don't know too much about. When I was preparing this, I've decided I'm going to learn more about him. His name is Baruch. His master, or his rabbi, was Jeremiah. Now, if you read the book of Jeremiah and Lamentations, Jeremiah dictated them, Baruch wrote them down. Baruch was even attacked once because of his relationship to Jeremiah. He suffered with Jeremiah when Jeremiah suffered because he was right there with him. He was similar to the Eliezer. He said devoted his life. There's even an apocryphal book called Baruch, named in honor of him. He didn't write it. We have no idea who wrote it. But they used his name because the children of Israel, the people of Israel, knew who Baruch was because of what he did in his service to his master. Now, in a lot of Bibles, the next sentence is linked into the same paragraph. But it's not the same paragraph unless the whole chapter is one paragraph. Because remember how he ended verse 17? Mentioned that this morning. Whatever you do in word or deed, don't have any words. What does he say in this verse? Whatever you do. He's linking the two together. He's saying that you can't take this section that I just talked about. It is part of what we talked about before. He said, now what I know is most commentators and most preachers, everything, they're going to take this section and set it aside and take it out of the context of this entire chapter. He says, don't want you to do that. This is all linked together. This obedience thing, what we talked about last week, what we went through then. This is all part of one thing. Serving and loving Jesus Christ. What role do you have in serving Jesus Christ? Because in this church, my job, my work, is to help you find out where your work is, if you don't know. Because each of you has a job, or you wouldn't be here. God would not have brought you here if he didn't have something for you to do. Okay? In those roles, and we'll probably look at some of those next week and how he uses each of us. And then he says, you're going to receive a reward. What's the reward? What does it comprise of? Well, let's go back to what he said, is that for whom the bell tolls. Yeah. He goes, what were those things that you were supposed to look forward to, strive for? What did he say back in verse 8 or whatever it was? He said, did he say something about heavenly things? The reward that we were going to receive are heavenly things. And what are those heavenly things? Do you remember what the heavenly things are? Galatians 5, 22 and 23. Love, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. You're watching Tariq. I don't know if he plays soccer. We'll pretend he plays soccer. Man, there's just a few seconds left in the game. The pass goes to Tariq, and boom, he scores the winning goal. What do you think Ambrose feels at that second? He loves his son. He's so proud of his son. He's so joyful. Everything's perfect in the world. For that few seconds, there is nothing that can match anything else. Oh! That is your 2-second introduction to heaven. When you have that event in your life where everything is right, there isn't anything wrong with anything, you're at complete peace. There is nothing. There's nobody that can upset you. Nothing can go wrong. Everything is just right. That's heaven. That's what we're to be striving for. That's the reward we're looking for. Because there's nothing to compare to it. That's heaven. Who cares about the particulars? If the particulars were important, God would have told us about them. What form we're going to be in, what actual praise and singing and what pray, all that was unimportant. Remember, God's never thought things were important. It's the heart, the soul that's important. And he says, what's important about heaven? What's important about what are those rewards? These are those rewards. I'm going to give you little snippets of them throughout your life. You're going to have those little feelings. You're going to have that time of just complete, utter peace and joy. Heaven. Get used to it. Because when you call on my name, that's your reward. It ain't wealth. It ain't friends. It ain't even getting along with people. It ain't none of this. It's getting along with Jesus. Have him control your life. And so, he said earlier, who do you serve? What role are you going to play in the spiritual life? Because he said there are consequences. And unfortunately, like every mountaintop experience has to have a valley. And Paul says, I've just reminded you of what heaven's going to be like. But I've got to remind you that there is another side. There are consequences to what you do. Now, if he's talking about the wrongs I'm doing as a Christian, if heaven's going to be so wonderful and I'm saved, how can our wrongs have any real consequences? So like it's saying going to a party, and instead of saying you can have cake and ice cream, you can only have the cake. Is that what he's talking about? Is that the consequences of me doing wrong? Is that I'm just going to get a little bit less than you do? Does wrong mean that we do not serve the Lord? Does that mean we have never accepted the Lord? Or does that mean that we've decided not to serve the Lord? And if the consequences of being on the outside of Jesus is hell, what does he mean when he says, when you do wrong? You have to answer that. Because you have to be the one who decides what God is telling you in that passage. Because it's your salvation that's at stake. You have to listen to his Spirit. You have to understand his word. What is he telling me? What am I being told? What standard is he setting for me? What kind of rewards can I expect? What kind of consequences can I expect from my actions, from the way I live? I have to examine myself. And then he says, without partiality. Not yet. So God isn't partial. But you know, I've never believed that. I spent most of my life believing that God loved me but didn't like me. Because I thought if God liked me, he would give me some of the things I wanted. I understand he couldn't give them all to me. And I know he supplied me with the basic needs. You do that because you love somebody. But, you know, I lose out on a job, I get laid off on a job, I get canned from a job, I get a business venture falls through, nothing. All these things. I mean, he just doesn't like me. I'm a loser. I'm losing everything. I've lost everything. My first wife dies. I lose everything. I don't succeed in anything. I'm just this little peon. Last in, first out. I'm nothing. It's because God doesn't like me. I'm going to continue going to church. I'm going to continue praying and singing and preaching and teaching. But I'm doing it because I owe it to God. Because I can serve someone who's not my friend. Someone who doesn't like me. I mean, I had a lot of bosses I didn't like and didn't like me. And that's how I saw that relationship. And then Valley Christian came along. And at least Mania came along. And God said, no, I let you be blind. I'm getting tired of you being blind. So I'm going to wake you up. Can't you see that all those were preparation? All those bad things, sad things, wrong things, not good things, everything that went wrong was preparing you for today? Don't you see that? Of course you couldn't see it when you was going through it. Neither could the guys in this book when they were going through it. They didn't see it either. Because you're not expected to see it. Because you're not me. Do you realize how many strings I had to pull to get this situation today? All the things I had to do, start doing for some of you 10, 12 years ago, some of you 60, 70 years ago, I had to start pulling those strings, manipulating to get you here for this morning. You had to get tired of the commute across the hill. You had to be hurt. You had to find something wrong. Something had to go wrong. Something had to go right. You're here because God put you here for a reason. And you know what? You don't even have to know what it is. You don't have to know why he did it. And someday you might get to see. You may be able to look back and go, that particular event happened at that particular time so that this could happen now. Now, I don't spend a lot of time going and doing that because I want to find out, I want to prepare for tomorrow and not live the past, live yesterday. So I don't spend a lot of time going back and saying, oh, that's why. I just, okay, he did it. Yes, that was why. Thank you, Lord, for opening my eyes. Now I'm ready for tomorrow. I'm ready for the rest of the day. Because God doesn't play favorites. He loves us completely, thoroughly, all of us. And he will continue working and manipulating and putting people, things, places, events in your life that will cause you, or should cause you, or he hopes to cause you to find him and to draw closer to him. That's what he's doing. He's working in each of us because something great is going to happen. Not great in man's eyes, great in God's eyes when we do that. Now to the King eternal, immortal, invisible, the only God, be honor and glory forever and ever. Amen.